he's very, very familiar with the North and the Hausa people there, who are largely Muslim, Islamic. And that's one reason they really haven't cracked down on Boko Haram, because, they're Muslim as well. And plus, there's the threat of, if you do crack down on what might happen to you. And she says, those people, the government up there, know what they're doing. And then she said she got furious with the American press. She said the American press, the ABC and NBC and all these people are putting out the story that, well, Boko Haram is just a response to poverty. They're very poor. Oh, and then they show ABC or whatever, they showed a film of this poor region in northern Nigeria where the Muslims are. She said, yeah, but that's in the inner, the inside and the very, very rural area. She said the vast majority of northern Nigeria, the capital, Lagos and all of them, she says, they haven't had a power failure in 10 years. They've got skyscrapers. She says the Sultan of, some state up there, and the Emir of another state in northern Nigeria, they have lots and lots of children by, their multiple wives, and all of them, even though they're filthy rich, all of them are on full paid scholarship to university. She said they're rolling in tons of money. And she said they just are completing, or in the process of completing, a $3 million widening of the Niger River so that they can have direct access to a port. She said, we have ports in the south, the Christian area. We have ports. They don't want to use those ports. They don't want to dredge those ports. Why? Because we're Christians. They want to have it all to themselves in the northern part of Nigeria. And so she said it's a farce what they're doing, and the way the news media is portraying this. It's a total farce. So I said, well, I'm sorry. It's all part of this plan. And I said it's the same thing they did with Kosovo, and the same thing they did in Iraq, and the same, all over the place. And she said, I asked her, I said, okay, what's going on with this dredging to create a port on the west coast of northern Nigeria, which is basically the Muslim area? And she said, well, there's 3 companies that are getting the $3 trillion. Now, before she can even say what the companies are, I have a sort of idea of who they might be. She said, number one, Halliburton. I said, aha, Halliburton, of the Middle East and fame and the whole background of 9/11 and Iraq and all that sort of stuff. And she said, yeah, and the Burger Company of Germany. I said, aha, a German company, as in that's why they had to get rid of Milosevic, was because he was blocking German access to the Mediterranean. And she said, and one other, let me guess, Chinese. Yes. And she said at first, she said there was a Chinese company, and again, I wasn't surprised. So here you have China, which is putting tons and tons of money into Africa, and you got the Germans, who are basically ruling Europe, and then Halliburton, which is sort of American and ubiquitous, it's multi-ownership. And so these 3 companies are building this, dredging out this huge $3 trillion, not billion, but $3 trillion project in northern Nigeria, right? And so they want to try to make nice with Boko Haram, just like the Saudis did with the Wahhabis, from which Osama bin Laden came. So that's what's going on. They know where they are. She knows it. She knows they can find Boko Haram whenever they want to.
Okay, fine. Hold that thought. We're going to be back in just a moment with Dr. Cuddy. And very little of what you've been told is true.
While the storm clouds gather across the sea.
All right, Dennis, you go right ahead.
Okay, so anyway, what's happening? I don't want to belabor it, but what's happening in Nigeria, if the media would to tell the truth, is part of this larger power elites plan, and the same sort of strategy is being replayed over and over. But because the public is kept ignorant, they don't see it. They don't see the similarities in events. They don't see the timing and so forth and so on. All right, now, back to domestic politics. Dr. Stan has had in the past this rather important debate today over Common Core, and he's had Orlean on, who's done a really good job and a good book on that. And what I want to do is, and I've mentioned it before, and I think I probably in the future will write some sort of news with views column about the background. I don't necessarily want to go into all the details because a lot of people have already done that. But I think in piecing together the larger picture, the larger puzzle, I'll probably go into some of the background and then point out the connections today. It's very important to look at Mike Cohen, who many people, even many researchers in Common Core, very prominent people, don't pick up on him. And he's strategically important, along with the other people, like the head of the College Board, who's a Rhodes Scholar, and then others as well. But Mike Cohen is interesting, going way, way back. And in fact, I think if you look at Mike Cohen's background, he has made his way to the very top of many organizations without really much educational background. I don't think he has an advanced degree in anything. I think it was in telecommunications or something like that. So he's one of those who's been strategically placed as well. But in terms of politics and in terms of the future, people are saying, just like before the 2008 election, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh said, no way Barack Obama is going to be reelected. The unemployment's too high. Nobody in our presidential history has ever been reelected with unemployment that high. And I said, oh, yes, he will be, and so forth. Well, the same sort of thing is like Jeb Bush. You have them today, Glenn Beck and others saying, oh, Jeb Bush is one of these moderate establishment Republicans, and, he's not going to make it, and so forth and so on, and the people are going to rise up, and so on. And so I'm just saying, well, let's just wait and see. So what's Jeb Bush's connection with Common Core? Well, Jeb Bush, way back, formed his foundation. It's called Foundation for Excellence in Education. Catchy title, right? And what is their goal? Success in education. And I said, wow, that's really challenging. Like, how can you measure what? It doesn't say they're going to improve reading by a certain percent. No, just success in education. So it's one of those general foundations for excellence in education. Well, what you find out is that, and this comes from an article not too long ago, I believe it's by Michelle Malkin. It's only, back in 2013, about, 9-10 months ago. And in this article, she says, one of Bush's foundation's behemoth corporate sponsors is Pearson, Pearson, the multi-billion-dollar educational publishing and testing conglomerate. Pearson snagged, now remember this is back in September, snagged the multi-million-dollar contracts to design the first wave of PARCC, that's Partnership for Assessment.
Hold that thought, Dennis. We'll be back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Dennis is simply pointing out that most people certainly have no idea what's going on. Certainly, before the last presidential election, all the experts, the writing, certainly from the conservative point of view, were sure Romney was going to be elected. And the only person I know who said no, it's going to be Obama. Why? Why? Because the establishment wants him. The establishment runs things, and they will put Obama in there one means or another. And then, of course, we're coming up to another election in 2016. And so Dr. Cuddy feels very strongly that Jeb Bush is going to be a very, very real candidate, the third in this new artificial line of presidents coming from the Bush Foundation and the Bush family, which is, of course, a very powerful subversive organization. But Dennis, you go right ahead, and you're talking certainly about is this about really more about Common Core or
right.
what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, this lineage here is hereditary, and that I'll remind the listeners that Philip Freneau's article in 1792 in the July issue of the publication called American Museum talked about the hereditary elite, which was to come and to try and take control of America. And he spelled it all out. But anyway, so what happened is his foundation is tied to the hip, according to Michelle Malkin, she's correct, to the federally funded consortium called Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. And they raked in $186 million through the Race to the Top. That's Obama's program, Race to the Top, to develop nationalized tests aligned to the Common Core program. So you have this alignment. And so keep in mind that this outfit, the multi-billion-dollar educational publishing testing conglomerate, Pearson, is one of the big corporate sponsors for Bush's foundation. Okay, so the company itself holds, I think it says here, a $250 million contract with Florida alone to design and publish its state tests, and Pearson designed New York's Common Core aligned assessments and is also exclusive contractor for Texas state tests as well. So here you have them joined. You have the Bush Educational Foundation to get tons of money from Pearson. Pearson is the leading provider of publishing and testing for Common Core. And so you see how these pieces of the puzzle fit together.
And I think it's so important that people understand education has nothing to do with teaching people facts and preparing them for life. It is preparing them to be global citizens in this wonderful new utopia that's planned. And basically, this is what they're really teaching our kids, that they're putting off calculus. They're certainly not teaching them adequately. Compare America's class kids when they graduate from high school, and they have a hard time competing with people from Lithuania and Latvia. Why? Because they're using our educational system to destroy the hearts and minds and souls of our children, and certainly to destroy their faith in God. Go right ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, and Common Core is like redesigning everything, including the values that it's going to be teaching. But what you have is they will say, oh, well, we're now integrating, geometry and algebra. And Common Core is math 1, 2, and 3, 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. But I pointed out to one of them, in other nations like China and in India, for example, they do that, but they also add trigonometry and calculus, to the integration. So
we don't have time for calculus in high school anymore.
Right.
I bet you, ladies and gentlemen, Common Core is taking calculus out of high school. Why? Because they're going to dumb down our kids. And where is the outcry that you're reading about in the newspaper, you're hearing about from Glenn Beck and the others? Why it's deafening in its silence? Go right ahead.
Well, I asked an education official with the government about that. She said, well, they can still take calculus. It's voluntary. I said, but it's not part of, the Common Core. Well, no, not yet. We'll take another look in 2015, and who knows, maybe then. But anyway, so they're redesigning everything along those lines. And what this does, Common Core, I wrote articles like 20 years ago for Pro Family Forum's newsletter with Dr. Shirley Carell. And at the time, and I have 2 or 3 articles in USA Today on their editorial page about, beware of national standards. But what this does is, at the time I was saying, well, if you have national standards, then people are going to have to align their curriculum to it, and so we'll have a national curriculum. And I was warning people, well, the added little wrinkle in this is they're going to have this Common Core becomes a testing device. And so what testing will do, including SATs, which is the college board, will lasso in the Catholic schools, the private Protestant schools, any parochial school, any private school, and the homeschoolers. Because if you want your child as a homeschooler to go, to UCLA or something, then you're going to have to align what you're teaching that child if they're going to get a good grade on the SAT. So this is one step even more than they've tried in the past.
But of course, the good grade doesn't mean anything. Basically, the grade is going to reflect whether you're going along with this utopian socialist agenda, not what you know or how you're going to be able to apply it in life. You go right ahead.
Okay. Well, one other thing of contemporary interest is there's a chapter in my book, we've already covered it, about the psychological conditioning of Americans and the use of misdirection. And the thing that I would point out there is